Hello and welcome, Bushy. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan,
Hello and greetings.
and we are now going to be continuing our Vagabondo review, which is available on Storyfire, YouTube, and Substack. And this episode follows the journey of Takezo and Matahachi. Now, they've kind of been captured by women of all things. This was one of Yoshikawa Eiji's really clever ideas, as the two men were wounded and hardly able to resist and thought they could find safety with these two ladies. Truth is, they didn't. In some ways, these two ladies were worse than the brigands that they were themselves kind of hiding from. Well, not really hiding, but kind of forced to pay tribute to. Truth is that Takezo is, for one thing, from the very beginning, suspicious of these women and mistrustful. On some level in the novel, it's hinted that he's afraid of them at this point in the story, aware that there's something more beneath the surface, and they have nothing but ill intent. In particular, Oko, the mother, scares him. Now, doubtless, very stupid people would say that there's something almost Freudian here, where, he just fears a strong, empowered woman, or some such nonsense. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's because he senses that she's like a snake, like a viper, waiting to bite, and that she'll only drag you down if you're near her. Naturally, no man in his right frame of mind would want to be anywhere near her because she's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And she ends up being she utterly dominates her daughter, Akemi. Now, Akemi's the name of the chapter, but that's because chapter 3 is going to be called Oko. This was all originally one volume. Bear that in mind. We're just doing chapter by chapter because, shut up, we can stretch it out however we want. Anyways, Akemi goes off, not wanting to be around her mother as her mother is weaving her spell over Matahachi. And Akemi at this point is a little taken with Takezo. Takezo ends up asking her a lot of questions that Matahachi's already been asking, but Akemi's kind of reluctant to answer. But she comes clean to Takezo, admitting that her mother and her were thieves, and that when they found Takezo and Matahachi, they were searching for weapons and items that they could sell or traffic, namely swords and such, which are valuable. And this is how they make their living. It's horrible. And it's also stated at the beginning that Mitsunari, the leader of the Western Army of Japan, is still on the run, as the Western Army was opposed by the Eastern Army. Well, obviously. But Mitsunari was a military staff member of Hideyoshi and was his most loyal vassal. Mitsunari was one of the many regents appointed to Hideyori's council, Hideyoshi's heir. But the trouble is that Mitsunari fell afoul of Tokugawa, who was hungry for the position of shogun. Tokugawa was scheming for the position of shogun and was undermining his own liege lord, Hideyori, who was technically Kwampaku. But Mitsunari gathered an army, gathered allies, and tried to lead them against Tokugawa. He ultimately failed, as there was treachery after treachery in the Western Army. You had some of them sending their wives instead to fight while they hid. I'm talking about Tachibana. In this case, Ginchio Tachibana was a remarkable warrior, but her husband was obviously a coward and refused to be out in the battlefield. Well, he wasn't much of a fighter, but still, he was a man. He should have been at the front rather than his wife. You had others who ended up screwing up really badly, and such as Uesugi, who were supposed to pincer Tokugawa alongside Mitsunari, and had they done so, they would have wiped out Tokugawa. But the trouble is, they chose to, for some reason, chase after Masamune Date when Date was already fleeing from them. Obviously, he was just there to try to distract them, but it was so obvious, so stupid, and the thing is, Masamune could not maintain a military campaign against the Uesugi. So all they had to do was have their peasants withdraw into the castles behind high walls Date's entire campaign would peter out. And it did. It did, without almost any fighting. And yet the Uesugi basically lost to him, of all people. Masamune was a no-show and a nobody who never amounted to anything. One of the most you could basically disregard him more than any other lord. He never accomplished anything. There's some sort of cult around him when he was basically worthless as a general and as an individual. Never amounted to anything. But the trouble is the Uesugi somehow lost to him. And the Uesugi were led by a really stupid man by the name of Kagekatsu. And he ended up somehow costing the entire war to Tokugawa by being guilty of dereliction of duty to his liege, that is to say, Ishida Mitsunari. So this entire military campaign was a total show, so to speak. I can't really say the actual term. You know what I mean. It was a disaster. Takezo fought on the side of the Western Army, so naturally Western Army men would be hiding because they don't want to be caught and killed. So Takezo is asking Akemi a lot of questions, and Akemi tells him, yes, we're thieves. And then she asks him, any other questions? And he asks, who's that? And it turns out that's Tsuji Kaze Tenmo, a brigand who falls afoul of Takezo, and he ends up being a long-term wise important character, if indirectly so, but short-term wise not terribly important. But, that's the life of a bandit. The fact is, his name is easier to remember than Uesugi Kagekatsu. Yes, I'm going to be mean like that to the head of the Uesugi. Honestly, Uesugi Kenshin could not have chosen his heir more poorly. And in this regard, Uesugi Kenshin should be scorned throughout history, because choose your heirs better. This was the equivalent of choosing Commodus, except I find it in some ways worse. And that's only because I'm a bit of a Uesugi fanboy, or at least I was, because, well, Kenshin beat Nobunaga without any guns. That's impressive. And on top of that, when you've got the fate of Japan and victory given to you, and there's no way you can lose, and you find a way to lose and cost your liege his life, and not only him, but long-term wise, Sanada Yukimura and a bunch of other very competent, important generals, you've screwed up. And yes, I know Commodus screwed up bigger than Kagekatsu ever did, but Kagekatsu should still be scorned. Any thoughts on this chapter? The art's, of course, perfect.
Yeah, there are a couple of points where I couldn't help but think that there's a horror element.
Oh yeah, when you're looking at Oko, when she's leaning over Matahachi and she's looking like a snake.
Yeah, and that's something that I noticed, that
it's creepy.
It's creepy, and it was intentional.
Oh yeah.
That it's like she's a human snake.
Yeah, you got to bear in mind that artistically, the whole idea of Oni and Yukai and whatnot, that is to say Japanese demons, this has had a lasting influence on Japanese art. And when I was in Japan, I even saw some architecture, or at least some sculptures, that referenced them, rather akin to how Christian cathedrals reference gargoyles in an attempt to scare off evil spirits. The sculptures I saw were pretty darn creepy. But they were, like, when you look at them, you can't help but stare. They're very amazing. And you just think, they did this with a chisel and a stake and whatnot. This is fascinating. And it's hand painted, and it's just so well done. So, yeah, this chapter is steeped in Japanese art. And that's the thing I love about Inoue Takehiko. It's just, he's steeped in Japanese art. But anyways, tell us what you think if you've read this chapter, what you think of our opinions of it. And don't forget to smash that subscribe button and to check out our Substack's many serial novels and our novel Victor Tempestson.